$4.5 million villa purchase notification hit my son's phone before I even blew out my birthday candle. By noon, my phone was buzzing like a hornet's nest. The family that had ignored me for years suddenly remembered I existed because I now owned something they desperately wanted.
If you've ever been overlooked, dismissed, or treated like you didn't matter, this story will hit home. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because this is how a forgotten mother turns silence into the sweetest revenge her family never saw coming.
The $4.5 million villa purchase notification hit my son's phone at exactly 11:25 a.m. By noon, my phone was buzzing like an angry hornet. By evening, I was the most popular woman in all of Connecticut. Funny, isn't it? It only took one simple purchase, one act of pure, calculated silence to destroy my family's smug assumptions and flip the script they had written for me my entire life. You see, my family always forgot my birthday. Not once, not twice, but every single year for the last 15 years. My husband passed away long ago, and I had done everything. Raised our kids alone, made sure their school tuition was always paid, sat through every graduation and every heartbreak, and stood quietly in the background clapping for them as they built lives of their own.
But me? The woman who broke her back working night shifts? Who skipped meals so there was always food on the table? Who wore the same old dress to every event so her children could shine? I became invisible. My birthday was never marked on calendars, never spoken aloud, no cake, no candle, no happy birthday, Mom. Nothing. At first, I told myself I didn't mind. I convinced myself that mothers are meant to give, not take, that love doesn't need reminders. But as the years dragged on, something inside me withered. I'd smile through phone calls where they talked about their jobs, their travels, their children's birthdays, their anniversaries, yet not one of them paused to ask, "Mom, what about you?"
The silence around my birthday became a cruel joke I never laughed at. Year after year, I'd sit in my little house making tea for one, staring at a calendar that seemed to mock me. But this year was different, because I had been preparing something they never saw coming. You see, while they ignored me, I had been working, not loudly, not with announcements or fanfare, but silently, steadily. I built something of my own. I invested every spare dollar, every penny saved, every inheritance scrap wisely. Real estate, stocks, quiet little businesses I ran under my name. And with every forgotten birthday, I became more determined to make sure one day, one very specific day, they would never forget me again. So on the morning of my 72nd birthday, I made the transfer. $4.5 million wired straight into the deed of a villa overlooking the sea. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, private gardens, and a view that could make you weep. The kind of home that would make every last one of them choke on their morning coffee. And it worked. At exactly 11:25 a.m., the property agent sent confirmation to my email. But what I hadn't accounted for, my son, my too busy to call his mother son, was linked to one of my old accounts. The notification popped up on his phone before I even had time to sip my celebratory tea. By noon, the text started. "Mom, what's going on? Is this a mistake? A scam? Do you need help?" Then came the calls. Dozens of missed calls. Voicemails laced with fake concern. "Mom, pick up! You can't be serious! Where did you even get that kind of money?"
And by evening, my doorbell rang. For the first time in years, my family remembered me. Not because they loved me, not because they cared, but because I had something they wanted. And oh, the satisfaction that washed over me when I opened that door, looked each one of them in the eye, and said nothing. Just silence. The same silence they had given me on every birthday for the last decade and a half. But make no mistake, this wasn't just about money. This was the beginning of a lesson. The villa was only step one, because I wasn't done yet.
The first knock on my door came at exactly 6:02 p.m. It was sharp, impatient, more like a demand than a request. I didn't need to peek through the curtains to know who it was. My son, James, had always been heavy-handed, always the one who believed that the world and everyone in it owed him something. When I opened the door, there he stood, towering over me, his face red with a mixture of disbelief and anger, and right beside him, like a shadow clinging to its host, stood his wife, Marissa. Marissa smiled, but it was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Mom," she cooed, her voice sticky sweet. "We came as soon as we heard. You bought a villa?" I let the silence linger. I had become quite good at silence. James stepped forward, brushing past me into the hallway without even asking, "Mom, where did you get that kind of money? $4.5 million? This doesn't make sense. You don't even work anymore." I closed the door behind them, slowly, deliberately. My home had never felt so crowded. Marissa perched on the edge of my sofa, her designer bag placed neatly beside her, as if she were planting a flag. James paced like a restless wolf, muttering to himself. Finally, he turned and snapped. "You're not making smart decisions at your age. You could get scammed. You need someone, me, to manage this for you. It's for your own good." Ah, there it was, the script. The words I had predicted, rehearsed, even written in my mind years before this moment. I sat in my old armchair, folded my hands neatly, and looked him straight in the eye. "James, do you remember my last birthday?" He blinked. "What? What does that have to do with anything?" "Do you?" I repeated, my voice calm, steady. He hesitated. "Of course, Mom. We were busy. The kids—" "No!" My voice cut through his excuses like glass. "Not last year, not the year before, not for the last 15 years. Do you remember a single birthday, James?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marissa broke it with a brittle laugh. "Oh, come on, it's just a date. Everyone gets busy." I turned my gaze to her, and she faltered. Because in that moment, I wasn't the invisible, overlooked mother. I was the woman who had just bought a villa they couldn't even dream of affording. "It's never just a date when it's your mother," I said softly. James sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mom, you're being dramatic. Look, the point is, this villa, it's too much for you. You can't handle it. Let me take care of it. I'll manage the property, the paperwork. It'll be safe with me." There it was, the hunger in his eyes. The same hunger I'd seen him when he was a boy, reaching for the biggest slice of cake, snatching toys from his sister's hands. He hadn't changed. He had only grown greedier. I leaned back, letting his words hang in the air. Then, very deliberately, I said, "James, the villa is mine. Not yours, not Marissa's, mine." Marissa's smile cracked.
James froze. I could almost hear the gears grinding in their heads, the panic rising as they realized that the woman they had dismissed for so long was suddenly out of their control. James's voice dropped to a growl. "Do you have any idea how selfish this looks? You're sitting on millions while your family is struggling. Don't you care about us?" I almost laughed. The hypocrisy was staggering. For years, I had been scraping by while they bought new cars, went on vacations, lived lives of comfort without once asking if I was okay. And now, suddenly, I was selfish? I didn't respond. I just let the silence do the work. Finally, Marissa stood up, smoothing her skirt. "James, maybe we should give her time to think. She's overwhelmed. Old people, they don't always make the best choices under stress." Old people. The words stung, but they also ignited something in me. I stood, straighter than I had in years, and looked directly at both of them. "I am not overwhelmed, I am not confused, and I am not your fool. The villa is mine, and for once in your lives, you will learn to live without expecting me to fix everything for you." James's jaw tightened, his fists clenched. He wanted to shout, to demand, to intimidate. But something in my voice, something in my eyes, stopped him. Marissa tugged at his sleeve, whispering something I couldn't hear. He glared at me one last time, then stormed toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back and spat, "You'll regret this, Mom." And then they were gone. The house fell silent again. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from exhilaration. Because for the first time in years, I had spoken my truth, and I had seen the shock on their faces when they realized I wasn't the weak, forgotten woman they thought I was. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Their greed would not stop here. They would be back, and next time, they would come with sharper claws. And I would be ready. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, my phone began buzzing nonstop. Calls from James, calls from Marissa, even calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all. Silence was a powerful weapon, and I was learning how to wield it. But then came the message that made my stomach tighten. "Mom, we're coming over tonight. The family needs to talk." The family. Those words, once warm and comforting, now sounded like a threat. When the knock came, it wasn't just James and Marissa. My daughter, Claire, was with them. Claire, the one who had always been softer, quieter, the one who had sent me flowers on Mother's Day when James forgot. My heart had always had a softer spot for her. But tonight, as she stepped into my living room, her eyes didn't carry warmth. They carried calculation. "Mom, we're worried about you." Worried. That word again. They all sat, and for a moment, it looked like an intervention. James leaned forward, elbows on knees, his face dark with impatience. Marissa crossed her legs, tapping her manicured fingers against her bag. Claire sat closest to me, her hand brushing mine like a net being cast. "Mom," she began, "we know you've been through a lot, but buying a villa by yourself? It's not wise. Not safe," Marissa added, her tone sharp. "Not fair," James finished. Not wise, not safe, not fair. The words echoed in my head, but I refused to flinch.
What's unfair, I said slowly, is spending decades putting food on your table, raising you, sacrificing for you, only to be forgotten every year on my birthday. Claire's hand tightened on mine. Mom, don't bring that up. We're here because we love you. Love.
They didn't wait long to escalate. Greed has a short temper. First came the calls from family lawyers. Polite men with clipped voices offering to help mom make sensible decisions. I listened to them, warm and reassuring over the phone, and I let them ramble. Then, quietly, I called my own counsel. I had an excellent lawyer, Claire. Not my daughter, but a different Claire. Claire Alvarez, sharp as an ice pick and twice as focused. She had a reputation for shutting down family vultures without sentiment. I knew who to call because I'd been planning for this, quietly, for years. You let them talk, Claire told me when we met in her Walnut office. Let them show their hand. We'll do the paperwork. We'll create a structure that makes it legally impossible for them to access the villa, the accounts, or influence your trustees. She tapped a folder full of documents. A revocable trust is good, but for this, we'll use an irrevocable trust. Third-party trustee, powers of attorney locked to a fiduciary, and a residency clause. If they try any forged documents, we'll criminally prosecute. I smiled. Make it airtight. She did. The trust was arranged across 2 jurisdictions, accounts moved, and beneficiary designations changed. Taxes and titles transferred with precision. It wasn't flashy, but that was the point. Stealth beats spectacle every time. While they practiced threats in front of the neighborhood, I built legal walls. But legal walls aren't always enough for people who've already crossed moral lines. Soon, forged documents arrived. Copies of signatures, suspicious joint account forms that had been backdated, and an email, supposedly from me, authorizing a corporate transfer. They'd hired a paralegal to doctor things, someone who knew how to fake dates and build believable forgeries. That's when I learned something else about greed. It often requires inside help. The betrayal that cut deepest didn't come from my son. It came from someone I had trusted, my former financial advisor, Tom. Tom had helped me buy dividend properties and guided me through modest investments for years. He'd been friendly at book club, always patient with my questions. But Tom had started answering calls from James's number. He claimed he was concerned about my poor decision-making capacity and recommended that I sign a power of attorney making James a decision-maker. When I confronted him, his smile was oily. He said, using my maiden name like a discrepancy, "We're trying to help you avoid mistakes." His voice was too smooth. It felt like a confession wrapped in civility. Your son is worried. I'm only protecting what's best. Protecting? Like the men who covered wolves and called it fur. I felt a chill go through me, but I didn't lash out. Anger is loud, strategy is quieter. I thanked him for his concern and set a quiet plan in motion. Claire, my lawyer, moved immediately. She put a freeze on financial access, she filed notices with the security bureaus, and sent Tom a careful letter reminding him of fiduciary responsibilities and the criminal implications of colluding with family to falsify documents. The letter was polite and terminal. Tom stammered apologies, and then, predictably, vanished from my account list. He would call back later, begging for forgiveness. Legal letters tend to break men's appetites for greed faster than anything else. Meanwhile, the family tried a subtler assault. Claire, my daughter, arranged a so-called intervention in the church hall. They hired a counselor, brought over casseroles, and invited neighbors to talk lovingly about my recent purchase. The tone was public, soft, syrupy. the kind of emotional manipulation meant to shame someone into compliance. They planned for spectacle and sentiment. I prepared for evidence. At the intervention, James spoke first, practiced lines about legacy and community responsibility. Marissa pretended to cry. Claire recited memories like talismans. They looked like they were auditioning for sympathy. I listened to each sentence like a surgeon mapping incisions. When it was my turn, I spoke quietly, letting the quiet land harder than any shout. I gave so you could have, I said, looking at each of them. I missed birthdays so you could have parties. I worked and froze my feet at night so you would graduate with shoes. I did not give all of that so you could orchestrate my erasure and then pretend it's for my own good. I paused. No. A few gasps, a few coughs. The room's energy shifted because people saw what they had been grooming behind closed doors and what I had been doing in plain sight. They had prepared a theater of concern. I had prepared a ledger of truth. My lawyer then made the move I'd asked for quietly in advance. She handed a copy of the trust documents to the church elders and the lawyer circle they'd recruited. She explained, calmly, legally, why any attempt to access the villa or my accounts would be unlawful and publicly recorded. Word moved faster than we imagined. The elders who'd once nodded politely to the family's generosity now shifted uneasily, their support dulled by facts. That night, I slept in a bed that felt like mine for the first time in months. The house hummed with relief. But the war wasn't about my sleep. It was about the message. I would not be bullied into erasing myself. My silence remained my weapon, my paperwork, the shield. They continued to try. A lawyer they hired sent threatening letters. A man from a title company called, trying to make a mountain out of a comma. I let the letters multiply on my kitchen table, an ugly bouquet of desperation. Claire, my daughter, tried calling old friends to rally them. A former neighbor, who'd once borrowed sugar, refused to return my calls. People were choosing sides. And that was exactly what I expected. I did something else quiet but cruel. I began inviting the town into the villa, not to flaunt, but to create witnesses. I hosted small garden parties for my friends, invited the local volunteers who ran the senior pantry, and sponsored a modest concert at the local hall. The town already knew my story. Now they had faces and names to go with it. Anyone seizing for leverage would find public scrutiny waiting. Weeks turned into months. In the end, the forgeries fell apart because they were sloppy and because my paper trail, receipts, emails, notarized statements, a consistent banking history, was immaculate. The title company that had been approached by James's lawyer flagged the irregularities and refused to process the fake forms. The paralegal who'd produced the backdated documents had cut corners. Once a single forged signature was exposed, everything unraveled. Eventually, James's threats grew hollow. Marissa's polite cruelty curdled into resentment. Claire pivoted between fury and a tired, blank resignation. Tom paid a price in reputation and was fined by his professional body. People whispered. Some apologized. Others pretended they had nothing to do with any of it. But the truth had teeth now. And me? I kept being quiet. I walked the villa gardens and pruned roses, answered thank you notes from scholarship kids, and made sure my name was tied to good things the money could do. That was the final twist. I gave the power away in the only way that truly mattered. I made my wealth a source of community, not a family bargaining chip.
They wanted my money to validate them. I wanted peace to validate me. And still, despite the bruises and betrayals, I was winning.
The day of reckoning didn't arrive with police sirens or court summonses. No, it came quietly, the way all truth does. It was the town's annual charity gala, a small but proud event where families bid on baskets, sponsors donated checks, and people dressed up to feel important for an evening. I'd been invited to speak because, unbeknownst to my children, I had become the anonymous donor funding the local literacy program, a program that sent hundreds of underprivileged kids to tutoring each year. I walked in wearing a simple navy dress, not glamorous, but dignified, my hair pinned back neatly, my pearls understated. I didn't need to flash wealth. I only needed to stand tall. James and Claire were there too, arriving with Marissa on their arms, dripping entitlement. They'd been telling neighbors for months that I was confused and out of control. Tonight, they expected to control the narrative. They didn't expect what came next. When the announcer introduced me as the lead donor behind this year's $1.2 million literacy endowment, the room gasped. Heads swiveled, Marissa's painted smile cracked, James flushed beet red, Claire blinked like she'd been slapped. But I wasn't done. I walked to the podium, papers in hand, and spoke. I stand here not as someone who chased wealth, but as someone who knows what it feels like to be forgotten. I built my life through silence, through sacrifice, through work no one thanked me for. And when the people I gave everything to turned their backs on me, I chose to give to those who would never have had a chance otherwise. The applause was hesitant at first, polite, restrained. Then it swelled. People stood. The same neighbors who had believed James' whispered lies were now staring at me with something new in their eyes. Respect. James, Marissa, and Claire tried to leave discreetly, but they couldn't escape the whispers. I heard them even from the stage. Weren't they saying she was broke? I thought she was senile. Didn't they try to? Yes, they had. And now everyone knew. After that night, their grip on me, their influence, their half-truths, their forgeries crumbled. Nobody wanted to ally with them anymore. Even their lawyers pulled back, sensing a client base too toxic to touch. The forged documents they'd filed, rejected. The investigation into Tom, my ex-advisor, ended with fines and suspension of his license. James's name began appearing in town gossip with a sneer. Marissa, who had once preened at social brunches, found invitations drying up. The final straw came when Claire, my daughter, tried to file for guardianship through the courts. She thought she could argue I was unfit and needed responsible oversight. What she didn't expect was my lawyer, Claire Alvarez, presenting a mountain of evidence, video recordings, texts, legal filings, even the forged papers tied to their fingerprints. The judge dismissed the petition with prejudice. His exact words, "Mrs. Hart is more than capable of managing her own affairs. This petition looks less like concern and more like coercion." The gavel hit. Just like that, their last weapon shattered. After court, James cornered me in the parking lot. His voice wasn't angry. It was broken. "Mom, why are you doing this? We're family." I looked at him, really looked at him, at the boy I once patched knees for, who I stayed up late quizzing for spelling bees, who once hugged me after nightmares, and I realized something. He wasn't asking why I fought. He was asking why I stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own choices. "Because," I said softly, "family doesn't steal from family." He opened his mouth, then closed it again.
and for the first time in years, he had nothing left to say. Weeks later, I sat in the villa garden. The roses were in bloom, soft petals catching sunlight. I had just received a letter from a teenager in the literacy program. She wrote, "If not for you, I wouldn't have graduated. Thank you for believing in me." That single letter meant more than all the hollow apologies or manipulative family meetings, because here was someone who appreciated without taking. I didn't need revenge written in fire. I didn't need public screaming matches or ruined bank accounts. My revenge was quieter, sharper. My children wanted me erased, dependent, invisible. Instead, I stood taller, richer, and more respected than they could ever imagine. The silence I had once carried in pain now became my power. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the very people you raised, fed, and sheltered. My children wanted me weak. Instead, they taught me strength. So, if you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or treated as disposable, remember this: you don't need to scream to win. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is living well, living freely, and watching the ones who cast you aside trip over their own greed. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I share new stories every day about betrayal, karma, and the kind of justice life serves when you least expect it.